Hey everyone, glad to have you here. If this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories like this. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, get comfortable, it's time to dive into a chilling tale. I remember the morning we received the orders. It was early spring, 1915, and we were stationed on the northern edge of the Argonne forest in France. The war had already carved the land into pieces. Trenches, craters, wire. But the forest remained strangely untouched. It stood quiet, heavy. The French soldiers avoided it. They said the trees didn't echo and sometimes voices didn't come back at all. We didn't listen to stories. We listened to orders. And that morning, they told us we were to investigate a tunnel. Intelligence suggested the enemy had been digging a listening post. Something deep, quiet, and well hidden, far from the lines, beneath the forest itself. A strange place for a tunnel, but we were told the Germans had become inventive. 12 of us were sent out, engineers mostly. I was one of them. My name is Private Samuel Reeds. We moved out before dawn. The forest was darker than it should have been. There were no birds, no wind. Even our boots didn't make the sounds we expected. We weren't walking on leaves or twigs, just soft, soundless soil. One of the men muttered that he couldn't hear his own footsteps. I told him to save it. Truth was, I couldn't hear mine either. After an hour, we found the entrance. It didn't look like much, just a dip in the ground, ringed with carefully placed rocks, as if someone wanted it to blend into the landscape. A wooden frame held the soil at bay, forming a narrow arch that led into the slope. There was no debris, no loose earth, no sign of recent digging. It looked clean. Too clean. Corporal Allen shined his torch inside. The beam stretched forward in a tight, perfectly straight line. No bends, no shadows. It was as if the tunnel had been drawn with a ruler through the ground. There was no moisture in the air, no smell of damp soil. Instead, the air was dry, unnaturally dry, and carried a faint metallic scent like old coins. Behind it, something fainter still, almost hidden, the smell of parchment, of dry paper. We descended in pairs. Allen and I led, the others followed at intervals. The tunnel sloped downward at a consistent angle. Every few meters, Allen marked the wall with his knife, 1 notch, then 2, then 3. The deeper we went, the stranger things became. The soil didn't change. It didn't crumble, didn't shift. The walls were solid, as if the earth had hardened long ago and decided not to move again. At the 5th mark, someone asked if it was getting brighter. We stopped. Our torches were still lit, still flickering slightly in our hands, but ahead of us the tunnel shimmered. Not with light exactly, more like the distortion you see above hot asphalt in summer. Except it was cold, very cold. We kept going. The 7th mark was where the tunnel changed. The rough earth walls gave way to something smoother, not dug, not natural. The surface looked molded, like heated clay left to cool into a perfect curve, seamless, pale, almost shiny in the torchlight. Private Hughes reached out and touched it. His fingers tapped once, then twice. The wall responded, not with the sound of stone or wood, but with a hollow tone, dull and deep, something between bone and bell. Then came the knocks, 3 of them, slow, measured. None of us moved. Corporal Allen whispered, "Keep moving." His voice didn't sound like it came from ahead of me. It sounded like it was just behind my ear, even though he was walking in front. I turned. No one had spoken, but we all heard it. We moved on. The walls narrowed slightly. The air shimmered more. The torchlight dimmed, not because the batteries failed, but because the darkness seemed to grow thicker. It didn't swallow light, it bent it. Then, we found the first object, a helmet. British, bent, scarred. No blood, no dirt, just lying there facing up as if someone had placed it carefully. Next to it, a single boot, upright, empty. It was pointed toward the entrance. That was the moment I began to realize we hadn't found the tunnel. The tunnel had found us. We didn't stop. We didn't speak. There was something about the air that told us silence was the only safe thing left. The shimmer in the tunnel thickened the deeper we moved, like walking through a slow current. Our torchlight reached only a few steps ahead now, and behind us the light seemed to vanish almost immediately. It was like the dark had learned how to follow. Alan kept glancing back, counting the men behind us. He tapped my shoulder and mouthed something. I couldn't hear him, but I understood. One was missing. We stopped and turned our lights on each face in line. 11. We had been 12. The man behind Hughes was gone. His name was Barker. Big, quiet, reliable. No one had heard him speak since we entered. No one had heard him leave either. Alan whispered, "Hold position," and turned back, retracing our path a few steps. Then he stopped. We waited. He didn't move again. I stepped toward him and placed a hand on his shoulder. It was trembling. I looked past him, shining my light down the tunnel behind us. There was nothing there. No sign of movement. No footprints on the floor. No shift in the dust. But I swear I heard breathing. Not ours. It was deeper, slower, like something asleep but not resting. Like something thinking between each breath. Alan came back slower this time and told us to stay together. No more spacing out. No more silence. If we spoke, we had to speak names. "Keep your names close," he said. "Don't lose them." No one asked what he meant. We reached what looked like a doorway. The tunnel widened for the first time. The curved walls smoothed out completely. There was no door, just an archway of darker material. Stone maybe, or something older. On the other side was space. A large chamber, circular and quiet, with a faint blue haze that drifted near the ceiling like low smoke. The air inside felt heavier. The temperature didn't drop, but something settled on our skin. I didn't notice it until I realized I could feel my own heartbeat in my fingertips. It was like pressure, but not from gravity, from memory. That doesn't make sense, I know, but it's the only word I can use. The chamber was empty except for one thing. A table or altar rising from the floor in the exact center. No seams, no joints. It was part of the ground. And on it, a canteen, British standard issue. Next to it, a watch, still ticking. Private Hughes picked it up. He held it to his ear and frowned. "It's ticking backward," he said. Someone laughed nervously and the sound echoed, finally an echo, but it didn't bounce off the walls. It circled, like it didn't want to leave. Then the echo faded, but not all at once. It peeled away, layer by layer, like it was being taken apart by something. And that's when we heard the voice. Not from the tunnel, not from ahead. From behind us. It said, "Why are you here?" We turned, lights swinging. No one was there. But one of the soldiers, Clark, dropped his rifle and took a step forward, wide-eyed. "My mother used to say that," he whispered. "Exactly that, when I came home too late." Alan grabbed his arm. "No one moves alone," he said, "no matter what you hear." Clark nodded, but I could tell. He wasn't really with us anymore. Not fully. His eyes kept flicking to the corners of the room, watching for someone we couldn't see. Alan turned back to me and said, "Something here doesn't want us to leave." I nodded. Because I already knew. We were too far down, and we had taken something with us. We stayed in the chamber longer than we should have. No one said it, but we were afraid to leave it. Out there, in the tunnel, the dark felt like it watched. In here, it merely waited. It was different. We tried to take count again. 11. Barker was still gone. Clark wouldn't stop muttering. He kept turning his head as if listening for someone just behind his shoulder. His whispers were getting softer, harder to follow. But I heard him say one thing clearly. "She's still at the window." There were no windows. We needed to leave. Alan gave the order to fall back. Everyone was ready, more than ready. We hadn't seen anything move, but it didn't matter. The weight in the air was pressing against our ribs, as if the deeper we breathed, the more of it we let in. We re-entered the tunnel and turned back toward the entrance. We walked in single file again, more tightly packed this time. Torches flickered but didn't die. We passed the smooth walls, the shimmer, the silence. Alan counted the scratch marks as we passed them. 7, 6, 5. Then he stopped. There was no fourth mark. Just blank wall. Same distance, same place where he had scratched the number 4 with his blade. It was gone. He looked at me, then back at the wall. "I remember doing it," he said. "Right here." We kept walking. 3, 2. The first mark was gone too. The entrance never appeared. We should have seen light by now, even a little. We should have felt the air shift, heard birds, wind, something. But it was only more tunnel. Same walls, same dark, same smell. Private Hughes dropped to his knees and started breathing hard. He said he couldn't feel his hands anymore. His fingers were touching the floor, but he kept asking if they were still there. I helped him stand, and he looked at me, really looked, and said, "We're walking in circles, aren't we?" I told him no, but I wasn't sure. The walls were the same, the air was the same, even the shimmer was the same. Behind me, Clark started humming, low, uneven. He said it helped him keep the other sounds out. When asked what sounds, he paused, then, very calmly, said, "The ones that sound like us." We kept walking. At some point, I realized I hadn't blinked in minutes. The air was drying my eyes too fast. I forced a breath, tried to focus. I could see the people ahead of me, their shadows stretched by the flicker of the torches. But then I noticed something wrong. There were more shadows than men. I stopped, counted again. 9 men ahead of me. But 10 shadows. The extra one didn't match anyone's movement. It walked beside Clark, but just slightly out of step. When we turned to look, nothing. Clark asked why I was staring at him, and I said nothing. Because I didn't know if it was still standing next to him, or if it had moved. Alan called another halt. He was breathing heavier now, like someone who'd been running, though we had been walking slowly the entire time. He asked if anyone remembered how long we'd been inside. Someone guessed 30 minutes. Another said 2 hours. No one was sure. I checked my watch. It had stopped. Just like that. Alan checked his. It had gone backwards. There was no sense in it anymore. Then, from up ahead, or maybe behind, we heard footsteps. Not ours. They came slow, then faster, then stopped. A voice called out. But it didn't say help. It didn't say names. It just said, "Don't follow me." Alan pointed forward. "Move," he whispered. "Move, now." No one questioned it, because none of us wanted to know who said it, or how it had our voice. We walked faster after that, not quite running, but close. The fear had shifted, less like panic now, and more like pressure. Something was watching, yes, but not with eyes. More like it was studying us with silence. Every sound we made seemed to belong to the tunnel now. Our footsteps weren't ours anymore. The echoes came half a second too late, or not at all. Someone said they saw daylight up ahead. A faint glow, pale and flickering. We turned off the torches for just a second, hoping to preserve the batteries. But in the dark, the glow vanished, and in its place came the faint outline of something else. A doorway. A square shape at the far end of the passage, perfectly shaped, framed like an entrance we didn't come through. We turned the lights back on. The doorway was gone. Alan swore under his breath and told us to keep moving. I heard Clark behind me say he wasn't sure which way we were going anymore. I told him forward. He asked what forward meant. I didn't answer. The tunnel began to feel longer than it should have been. The marks Alan had made on the wall didn't come back. No notches. No signs we had ever passed through here before. We began to wonder if we had walked too far. Maybe the tunnel had never been this long. Maybe we weren't even in a tunnel anymore. Maybe it was something else. That's when we heard Barker. His voice. It was ahead of us, clear, calm. "Reeds," he said. "My name. Nothing else, not frightened, just calling." Alan turned to me and shook his head. I didn't move, but someone else did. Clark stepped forward fast like he'd been waiting for a reason. Alan grabbed for him, missed. Clark ran into the dark ahead, torch in hand. The sound of his footsteps echoed too long, as if the tunnel had stretched suddenly to make room for him. Then there was nothing. A few seconds later, the light came back, but in the wrong place. It flickered on the wall beside us just for a moment, like someone had turned it around and pointed it at us from the side. Then it blinked out. We didn't call his name. None of us said anything. Alan gave the signal to move again, quieter this time. I don't think any of us wanted to hear our own voices echo back at us wrong. The tunnel turned, a bend we hadn't seen before, a corner that didn't exist earlier. We followed it without questioning. We had passed the point of reason, now we were only listening to instinct, and even that didn't feel like our own anymore. We came into a room. Not a chamber like before. This one was different. It was larger. The ceiling arched too high to see, lost in shadow. The floor was wet, but not with water. A thin layer of something sticky clung to the soles of our boots. The air smelled like rust and wet earth, but deeper than that, like something sealed a long time ago had finally been opened. There were no walls, just darkness at the edges, pressing in, refusing to show its shape. At the center of the room was something that looked like a mirror, framed in iron, standing freely, untouched by dust. But the surface wasn't glass. It rippled, moved slowly, like the skin of water disturbed by breath. Someone whispered, "It's breathing." I didn't see who. One of the men, Mitchell I think, stepped closer. He didn't reach out, just stared into it, and then he turned to us and said something none of us understood. It wasn't gibberish. It wasn't German. It was language, but one we weren't meant to know. And then his nose started to bleed. He smiled as it did, a soft, sad smile. He wiped it away and sat down on the floor, cross-legged like a child waiting for a story to begin. We tried to pull him back, but he didn't resist. He just closed his eyes and said, "It remembers me." Then the mirror went dark. No more ripples, just still. And when we looked again, Mitchell was gone. No sound, no trace, just empty space where he had sat. No one moved for a long time. We just stood there, staring at the empty space where Mitchell had been, afraid to speak, afraid to look at one another for too long. Alan finally said, "We have to keep going," but his voice sounded wrong. Not different in tone, but like it had been stretched, pulled forward from somewhere a few seconds behind us. I looked at him and nodded, but I think he already knew. I didn't believe we were going anywhere anymore. We left the mirror, or whatever it was, and re-entered the tunnel. Except it wasn't the same tunnel. It bent too often. The walls breathed too softly, and the light didn't land the way it used to. Everything had started to feel like memory, like we were walking inside the echo of a place that used to exist, something preserved only in how it had made people feel. Behind us, footsteps began to mimic ours, perfectly. When we stopped, they stopped. When we moved, they moved. I tested it once, took a step out of rhythm. The footsteps behind waited, then matched my pace again, just slightly out of sync, like they wanted me to know I wasn't imagining it. Then we saw something written on the wall, words carved into the surface by something sharp or old. They weren't in English, not in any language I could name. But somehow I understood what it said, not in words, more like a feeling, pressed into the letters. The message was clear. You were seen. We kept going. At some point, we passed a figure sitting against the wall. It was a British uniform. Clean, unmoving. The head was tilted down, helmet still on, arms folded across the chest, like someone had fallen asleep mid-watch. We didn't stop. No one even said anything. We just walked past it in single file, pretending it was normal, like we saw things like that every day. But when I passed closest, I glanced down and saw its chest rise. Once. Then nothing. No breath after that. Alan turned to me later and asked if I had seen it. I said no. He said, "It was holding my knife." We reached another chamber. This one wasn't empty. At the far side, barely visible in the weak light, stood something large and flat, like a wall, but it didn't reach the ceiling. A monolith, maybe. Smooth, slate-colored. Its surface shifted slowly, but not like water. More like something beneath the surface was moving, trying to push through but without force. Just presence. We didn't approach it. No one had to say anything. The fear wasn't panic anymore. It had aged, matured, turned into something we carried in our pockets now, like a coin we couldn't get rid of. We were beyond reason, beyond orders. We weren't even sure how long we'd been there. Our mouths were dry. Our watches no longer ticked. We tried to speak again, to say names, but the words didn't feel right. Some syllables were harder to form, like something had been taken from the language or from us. It was Alan who said it first. I don't remember my own voice. He repeated a sentence 3 times, and each time it sounded thinner, like the air was eating pieces of it before it reached our ears. That's when the ceiling began to flicker. Not collapse, not shake. Flicker. As if it had never been solid, only pretending to be. The torch beams couldn't find it anymore. We stopped just short of the top, bent away by some invisible curve. Then, the air changed again. Heavy, yes, but warm now. Too warm. As if something had drawn breath inward, something enormous and slow, and we had walked straight into its lungs. Alan dropped his torch. It didn't land. It just faded out on the way down, like light dissolving into water. He didn't bend to pick it up. He just looked at us and said, very quietly, "I think we're the only thing here that's still trying to leave." We stopped trying to find the way out. At some point, even Alan gave up pretending he knew which direction we'd come from. The tunnel bent again. Or maybe we bent. I couldn't tell anymore. It felt like we were walking in a loop that forgot it was a loop. Every step landed softer. The floor wasn't earth anymore. It was memory, or the shape of memory. A path made of thoughts that didn't belong to us. Then we came to the last room. We didn't walk into it so much as find ourselves already inside. One moment we were in the tunnel. The next, the walls opened like a slow blink. We didn't remember turning. We didn't remember stopping. It was empty. No sound, no echoes, no light source, and yet we could see each other. That's when we realized we were 5. 5 out of 12. I could name them all in my head when we entered, but now the names were slipping, like trying to remember a dream before it fades. We stood in silence. No one spoke. Maybe no one could. And then, in the far corner of the room, a single chair. Not a throne, not military. Just a simple wooden chair, older than anything else down there, and sitting in it, someone. I can't say if it was a man, or if it had ever been. The shape was familiar. Human, yes, but the proportions were softened, erased, like something that had worn human skin too long and forgot how to keep it on properly. It raised its head slowly, and I saw my own face. But not as I was, as I had been. Years ago, cleaner, younger, before the war. It didn't blink. It only smiled. And the smile was the worst part. Not evil, not cruel, just deeply, endlessly patient. like it had been waiting for me to see it. Alan moved first. He stepped forward calmly, as if pulled by a rope we couldn't see. He turned back to us and said, "It's all right now." I wanted to stop him, but I couldn't lift my arms. My body wasn't mine anymore. He sat in the chair. The figure in the chair stood. They passed each other without speaking. And when the new Alan turned to face us, he wasn't Alan. Not really. The eyes were too still. The smile didn't belong. He stepped past us back into the tunnel. We followed, not because we chose to, but because the room was closing. Not physically, not with walls. It was folding, inward, like breath being drawn into lungs that had never exhaled. And then we were outside. Just like that. No doorway, no sound, no exit, just sunlight and trees. We were standing at the edge of the forest, same as before. Same boots, same uniforms, same silence. Except now, there were only 3 of us. The others were gone. No one spoke of it. We were found 2 hours later by a search party. They said we'd been missing for 2 days. They asked where the others were. We didn't answer, not because we refused, because we couldn't remember their faces anymore. Just names. Some of them. I was sent to a hospital, then discharged. No injuries, just fatigue, they said. But I never really came back. Not fully. Sometimes I wake up at night thinking I'm still in the tunnel. Sometimes I look in the mirror and the reflection takes a second too long to move. And once, just once, I sat alone in the dark and saw my younger self sitting in the corner of the room. He smiled. Patiently. Waiting. I never told anyone what really happened in the forest. They wouldn't believe it. They'd say the mind plays tricks, that war bends the brain in strange ways. Maybe that's true. But I know one thing for certain. We didn't find the tunnel. It found us. And I don't think it was ever part of the earth. I think it's part of something older. Something that listens. And remembers. And sometimes when it forgets something, it opens. Thanks for listening till the end. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and subscribe. It helps keep the channel going and brings more stories your way. Remember, the darkness is always closer than it seems.